Friends, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you here. We have amidst us today Dr. Subhash Sharma, Dean of the Indian Business Academy, a very accomplished person in the study of management. He had his postgraduate diploma in business management in Ahmedabad, later on his PhD from University of Southern California. He has given a very valuable contribution to this branch of knowledge by his very illumined work, Creation from Shunya in the year 1993, Management in New Age, Western Windows and Eastern Doors in 1996 and 2006, and Quant and Rope, Science, Mysticism and Management in 1999. We are very glad to have him here today. He has traveled almost equal number of hours to be here right from Krishnarajapuram. And the subject matter of the today, a new political vision. It may look very ordinary, but it is extraordinary in the sense it has both a subjective and an objective field of knowledge. As you all know, vision is always used for a subjective understanding, and political term is used always for an objectivity or an objective field of knowledge. From this very title, you can know he is going to speak something which has a link between the subjective and the objective field of knowledge. I extend him a warm welcome on your behalf, on my behalf, and on behalf of the Gokhale Institute of Public Affairs, and request him to deliver today's evening talk, a new political vision.
You will be helping me from there?
Yes, sir. I will be here.
You?
I will be here.
Okay,
Just switch off this light. Just only this light.
Okay. A very good evening to all of you. It is indeed very wonderful to be here and interact with you on a theme which I think will be of interest to everybody, right from the common man to the intellectuals of the country. The theme which I have chosen is the idea of an alternate political vision. And I think he has beautifully summed it up, an integration of the objective and the subjective. The question is, how do we achieve that integration? What is the process through which we can achieve the integration? Today, when we look at our life as an ordinary citizen or a corporate or the government institution, we find basically there are four fundamental forces which are influencing us in every walk of life. Now, what are those four fundamental forces? And what I am going to present to you are some of the ideas which I have been developing over a period of time, and I have also presented some of them in some other conferences. And recently in Bangkok, there was a conference on the Asian dialogues, and some of these ideas were presented there also. So when we look at those four fundamental forces, can somebody help me from there? Okay, yeah. So what are those four fundamental forces which are influencing us in terms of our day-to-day existence? Number one, force of market. Number two, the force of state. I am using the phrase in a technical sense, which becomes for more operational meaning it becomes the force of the government. We are all familiar with these two forces. And in intellectual literature, last 100 years, there has been a lot of discussions on what is the nature of interaction between the four forces. Next. Yeah. Next. So these are the four forces. Force of market, force of state, force of people, and the force of the self. So at a macro level, today what we see is a dynamic interaction between these four forces. And what is the nature of dynamic interaction? How are these four forces interacting and thereby influencing our life? What is the nature of interaction? Which force is more dominant? If you go to the MG road, which force is dominant there? Which force you see or experience or feel? You feel the force of market. But you walk down and reach the Vidhan Sada and enter the buildings there. There is no market. You see the force of state. And then if you participate in an agitation and you happen to meet Medha Patkar or somebody like that, what do you feel? Not the market, not the state, force of people. Social movements represent the force of people. And then you decide to go to Sri Sri Ravi Shankar's ashram, or this on the Bull Temple Road, Swami Vivekananda's ashram, Ramakrishna ashram. Which force you feel there? Force of self. So these are the four forces which we see every day influencing us. But last 100 years, intellectuals had not integrated them. All the discussion was either in the force of market or the force of the state, what we call the capitalism and the socialism or communism. All the intellectuals. And they never bothered to integrate the idea of the force of people. Though probably they talked about it here and there. And the idea of force of self. So a holistic vision was never articulated in the entire history of humanity, in spite of such great intellectuals whose things we read every day. So that is the basic idea. And what is the nature of interaction? The question is, let's now focus on first three forces. The force of market, force of state, and the force of people. So you have three models of development. A model of development which is state-driven development. The government is the most powerful and the government drives the development. That is what was known as, at one point in time, this socialistic approach to development, or the so-called socialism. Then we found 1991, Manmohan Singh said, no, we have to cut the wings of state, and LPG concept came. So LPG concept gave a dominance to the market. So today what we find is the development is driven by the market and not so much by the state. In model number one of development, it was the bureaucrat who was deciding, and I am sure some of you are here and you have got that experience of directing the development during your era. So it was the government bureaucrats who were driving the development, because at that point in time markets were not fully developed. So there was a reason, there was a logic. The public sector was given a commanding height at that point in time. Then LPG came, our corporates started performing, and today if you see, the development is driven by the CEOs of whether it is IT companies or any other companies. So it is the CEO who has a greater voice compared to many others. And then of course, both the CEOs and there is a hybrid situation. The CEOs and the bureaucrats got together, and that is what they call it as public-private partnership. So today when you open newspapers, you will find this term has become very popular, the public and the private partnership. But I have got a critique of that. Where is the public in public-private partnership? There is no public. It is only a CEO of the corporate world and somebody from the Vidhan Sabha. They are deciding for public what is good for public. There is no involvement of public. There is no participation of the public. So that is my critique of this idea of public-private partnership. In fact, I asked Nandan Nilekani, he came out with his book and he made a presentation at the Indian Institute of Public Administration in Bangalore. And that time I asked him this question, where is the public in the public-private partnership? We need to incorporate. And I didn't get this very satisfactory answer, because people have not thought this particular dimension, that how to involve the community. And the third model is that the people are dominant. People are dominant over the market and the state. Where is that model? In which country that model is operating? Is there any country where this model is operating? Or there is no country this model is operating? Can we do something to start this model, convert that into reality, where people become dominant over the market and the state? So these are the three approaches to development. Now this is the idea of the four forces, which I have put it like this: the market, state, and the people. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, this is the pointer. How does it operate? This one. Okay. So you have the market here, state here, self here, and the people here. I think that is somehow got hidden. And that is what I call the third model. I call it as capillary action model of development. Why I call it capillary action? In physics, the capillary action means something, the water flows up. So when you create a development process in which the development is from the grassroots up through the people's involvement, like the Dabbawalas, like the Amul, and many of those institutions, the Seva, the Lijjat Papad, and those are the institutions which we have created in India, which are basically, I call them as capillary action institutions, capillary action organizations. Not the kind of corporate model which we have imported from the West, not the kind of state model which again we have imported from the Western thinking, but a kind of a third model in which there is a participation of the people. So we have the two ideas here. So far people were fighting between the capitalism and communism. The Marxist scholars and the liberals, they were fighting between these two. What I call a binary approach to life. Either you are a communist or leftist, or you are a rightist. Either you are a liberal thinker or you are the leftist thinker. There is nothing in between. Some people said centrist. That terminology came. But that also did not recognize the role of the people and the role of the self. That means the vertical axis was missing. Only the horizontal axis was there. And it may now appear to be very surprising that for 100 years people fought on that. Revolutions were created around that. People were killed around that kind of an approach. And we totally ignored this vertical dimension. So this idea, I call it as holistic globalization. Not globalization, the way we know it, the way Dr. Manmohan Singh promoted it. But then, of course, after the advice by Amartya Sen and some others, now they came out with the idea of what is known as inclusive globalization. How do you include people who are in the marginal section? But that is also not complete idea, because that idea also does not include the dimension of the self. Amartya Sen has never explored the dimension of self. In fact, in his book Argumentative Indian, some of you must have read it, he does not mention anything about Vivekananda, anything about the spiritual thinkers which have been produced by West Bengal. And he mentions about all other West Bengal thinkers and conveniently avoids the spiritual thinkers because he doesn't want to give any credence to this dimension. So that is my critique of Amartya Sen. Of course, he is a great Nobel laureate and all that, but that does not prevent us, ordinary people, to take a critical look on the ideas. So that is the question here, the nature of dynamic relationship. Now I will give you a metaphor to understand this, and you will never forget this concept of holistic globalization. And that is, I think all of us know the 4 lions. So when I passed through the Vidhan Sabha, suddenly it struck me that these are the 4 lions. The lion of the market, the lion of the state, the lion of the people, and the lion of the self. How many lions you are seeing? You see only 3 lions. And which lion is hidden? Okay, somebody is saying people lion is hidden, and somebody is saying lion of the self is hidden. Most of the time what we find is the lion of the self is hidden from the view. And we see only 3 lions. In fact, if you see this diagram from 45 degree, next time you are going through the Vidhan Sabha, just try to see this diagram from 45 degree. And how many lions will you see? All 4. You will see only 2 lions. You will not even see 3 lions. That is the problem of the intellectuals over last 100 years. They were seeing only 2 lions, the lion of capitalism and the lion of communism. And the lion of the people and the lion of the self were completely ignored because you were looking at the whole issues in the society, all ideas in the society from the 45 degree angle and not from a total perspective. When I present this idea to my students, I get very interesting, answers to this. And I ask them, if you want to see all the 4 lions, what should you do? Take a top of the helicopter view. That means you take a holistic view. If you take the holistic view, then only you will be able to see all the 4 lions. Otherwise, you see only 2 lions or 3 lions depending upon which angle you are looking at it. So this is the idea of what I call the holistic globalization, looking at all the 4 forces and the dynamic interaction between the 4 forces and taking not a segmented view of reality, but a helicopter view of reality, and therefore you take a total perspective. So this is the basic fundamental concept which I thought I will share with you, and now onwards I will be going into further details of this idea and a kind of an analytical perspective. He said objective. So I will use that objective approach, the analytical approach, to create a political vision for the future of India and maybe future of world. Because now you get the idea of a political vision. That political vision must incorporate all the 4 lions. That is the basic idea. And then we must propagate that idea to the rest of the world, because these 4 lions belong to us. It is our symbol, India's symbol. And so we can use that symbol to propagate the ideas. So that is the basic approach. Now, how these 4 macro forces are generated? In order to understand the generation of the global level forces, we will have to look at the micro forces and how the micro forces are being generated. In order to understand that generation of micro forces, in my book Western Windows, Eastern Doors, I've got 3 fundamental frameworks. The first framework, I call it as mode of thinking. As individuals, what is our mode of thinking? And for that, I have identified what we call the 5 modes of thinking. And what are those 5 modes of thinking? The power mode of thinking. You are interested in power, so you become a politician. You become a bureaucrat. You will exercise power. Calculative mode of thinking. So you become a CEO, always interested in the profit and profit and profit. That is the way the mindset of a CEO will work, of a corporate world. Knowledge. Your mindset is knowledge driven. You become a scientist. You become an R&D specialist. You come out with new ideas. You generate new knowledge. Contribute to the knowledge economy. So that means your mindset is driven by the K factor, the knowledge factor. Then CFO, concern for others. How much concern you have for others? So if you are a Meda Patkar, then probably your CFO is very, very high because you have the concern for others. And then lastly, what I call the liberation from oppression, the LIFO mode of thinking. If you are feeling oppressed, you want to liberate yourself, and not only liberate yourself, you want to liberate the others also. And I am not talking of the moksha liberation. I am talking of liberation from oppression right here in our day-to-day existence. During freedom struggle of India, it was the LIFO mode of thinking which dominated because you wanted to get liberated. So this force of the liberation from oppression was very high, and it is that force which ultimately created liberation of the nation. And it was not only liberation of one nation, as we know, it was liberation from the colonialism. Half of the world was liberated. So that is the force of liberation. Maybe today we don't need it to the same extent. And then what we can do is, so these are the 5 modes of thinking, and this is what I call the spider diagram of the 5 modes of thinking. We are all like spider diagram will indicate which mode of thinking is dominant in us as individuals. And I always do this exercise with my students to find out which mode of thinking they have. So for each mode of thinking, if you have a 5-point scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for each one, then you can identify where you are. It will be interesting to do some mental calculation for all of us and see where I am in terms of the calculative. Am I at 4? In terms of knowledge, am I at 2 or am I at 5? In terms of power, am I at 3 or 4? In terms of concern for others, where I am I at 1 or 2 or 4 or whatever it is? Similarly, liberation from oppression, where is my score? Then what we do is we connect all those scores. Somebody will quickly like to share mentally if you have done the calculation and tell me where you are. That will be very interesting for everybody to know. Volunteer, anybody who will like to volunteer and say, yes, my score is calculative at 4 or knowledge at 3, power at 5, whatever it is. Concern for others at 4. Any volunteers? Okay, maybe then I will, okay, there is a young student. Yeah, I always find young students, 15. Not 15, for each one, within 5. You give me the vector, calculative is how much? Knowledge it is 3, 2, 4, 3. Okay, very good. So you get something, you go to the next one. Okay, now here I have given the score, an imaginary score for a person who is highly calculative oriented. He doesn't care for others. No concern for others. So he will be an exploitative CEO, a CEO who will exploit the others. Okay, because he has no concern for others. So he has got a tremendous amount of power orientation. The entire management literature of last 50 years concentrated on these two modes of thinking. There is a famous psychologist known as McClelland. He talked about need for power, need for achievement. And he also used the phrase need for affiliation, but that is not as strong as the concern for others. So this is one of the fundamental idea at the micro level which is influencing us, because if I am power oriented, I will manifest that behavior in society and that will get into my interactions. If I am calculative oriented, I will manifest in my interactions, even with the friends, I will be very transactional. I will always do calculation. Okay, this friendship, how it is going to benefit me. The cost-benefit mentality will be there, even in human relationships. If I am a CFO oriented, then maybe I will go and agitate like Medha Patkar and create a grassroots movement. So these micro forces are being reflected in the society in many different ways, and we always experience it. Only thing which I have done here is I have given an analytical framework, a conceptual foundation for understanding that behavior. The second idea is again connected idea, and that is what is the model of human being which we have at the back of our mind. Again, with my students I do this exercise, but you are all very senior people, so I will come straight to the sort of framework. And there are three entities inside our psyche, inside our body, as a human being. And what are those three entities? One is that we are bio-spiritual in nature. There is a biological dimension, there is a spiritual dimension. The Western world was very, very reluctant to accept this idea, because Darwin, survival of the fittest, to eliminate the rest. That sentence he didn't complete, but that was the meaning. That was the idea which was the biological idea. Then we have the second model, which we call the psycho-economic entity. We are psycho-economic in our behavior. When you go to the market, now people in the management field are finding that it is the psychological dimension which is more dominant even than the economic dimension. But we have all the rational theories of economics to explain the human behavior, which ignore the idea of this psycho-economic entity. And the third dimension is the human beings are socio-political in nature. We always use that famous phrase, we are social animals, we are political animals. So when we put all these ideas together, then we get a holistic view of the human beings. And what is that holistic view of the human beings? That holistic view of the human beings is reflected in terms of an idea which in my book, Western Window, Eastern Door, I first gave that framework in 1996. I call it as basket of needs. That is the basket of needs. Of course, there is a famous psychologist known as Maslow who talks about hierarchy of needs. And I think everybody on the earth today knows hierarchy of needs concept, because it has been reproduced in every management book, in every psychology book, in even economics books, political science books. Almost every book on the earth, immaterial of whichever field it is, they talk about the hierarchy of needs. But here is a counter idea, that it's not hierarchy, it's a basket. And you make a choice of that basket. You can optimize your needs. You can increase the size of the basket. You can reduce the size of the basket. Need maximization, need minimization, and need optimization. So you get three models. The maximization of the need, ye dil mange more, the Pepsi advertisement. That is basically trying to tell you, maximize your needs. And then if you are a Jain Muni or you are in Himalayas, you are surviving only on water and air, then you are need minimization. But for ordinary people like us, it's basically a need optimization. So that is the basic idea. Again, all these 6 forces here, which are micro level, get reflected in our social behavior. And you can use this framework to analyze all the thinkers, and I see the thinkers of so many thinkers in this hall. If you pick up any of these thinkers and see from which cell they are talking, then we will get very interesting insights. Adam Smith was talking only from that space, that triangle, the economic triangle. Maslow, self-actualization theory, only from the psychology triangle. Karl Marx, socio-political. You take any thinker.
Einstein was thinking from the himself.
Okay, Einstein is beyond the basket of needs because he was in the arena of science. So this is for the social thinkers. Though Einstein did make a very interesting statement that without science and without religion, unless they both complement with each other, the knowledge systems are incomplete. So therefore Einstein was thinking from the spiritual space. When we take that statement of Einstein and relate it to the society, then we can see he was from that space. A great scientist, but intuitively he was also thinking at that level. An integration of the science and the spirituality, the hint is there in his statement. But of course, his concept of God was very different. He was not talking of the dualistic concept of God, but his concept of God was universal spiritual consciousness, and not God sitting out there in heaven and then giving judgments and this. That I think we need to understand that, to go deeper into that statement. So what we find is that most of the thinkers are thinking from one standpoint, one perspective. And maybe there are very few thinkers, and I don't know which name comes to your mind, who has given the perspective of all the entire basket of needs. Which thinker you think? Okay, he says Vivekananda, very good. But Vivekananda maybe did not articulate it very clearly because he was, at a philosophical level. But there is one person who articulated it, and all of us know his name. Gandhi. Okay. Gandhi was the only probably thinker in the entire history of humanity. I am not talking of the ancient times. I am talking of last 200, 300 years, who gave us that kind of a holistic view that this basket of needs to be integrated. And then he also said that there is enough for everybody's need and not enough for everybody's greed. That means indirectly he was saying, look, manage your basket well. Optimize your basket. Okay. So this is the second model, trying to understand the micro forces in the society. Now there is a third model, and that is what I call the underlying current of the behavior, and that model I call it as hierarchy of deeds. Maslow gave us hierarchy of needs, but he never told us how to satisfy those needs, what kind of mechanisms I should use. Can I satisfy in a tamasic way, to use our terminologies? Or should I use a rajasic way, or should I use a sattvic way? Which approach I should use to fulfill those needs? So he only talked about what I call the x-axis, but he never talked about the y-axis. And this model, which is the y-axis model, which I call the hierarchy of deeds model, gives us that conceptual clarity that there are 3 types of deeds: the selfish deeds, the good deeds, and the altruistic deeds. And in one of my papers, I use this metaphor of what I call the selfish gene and the noble gene and the altruistic gene. There is a famous book by Dawkins on selfish gene. So I used that idea and I said, look, gene, even at a genetic level, could be a noble gene. It is up to science to find it out. Could be an altruistic gene. It is up to science to find out if it is there. And I think that will be a great breakthrough in the field of science. So now the hierarchy of deeds or typology of actions. Now let us combine these 3 ideas to understand those micro forces and then the macro implications. Next. No, yeah, previous. Previous, yeah. So that's the integrative framework of the 4 lions. The 4 lions come alive because basket of needs we are exercising on day-to-day basis. Hierarchy of deeds. Sometimes we do good deeds, sometimes we do not do good deeds. Sometimes we become very altruistic. If there is a tsunami, everybody's heart is pouring out there, everybody becomes altruistic. So all the 3 types you can see in the society, and then the modes of thinking gets reflected. So therefore the holistic globalization, the 4 lions are result of these interaction between these micro forces. So now I have established the micro and the macro connectivity. The 2 are integrated together. Okay, next. Now from here we move to the next analytical framework. The next analytical framework is, I call it as the TCP principles. And from there I derive what I call the TCP matrix. Now I will explain what is the TCP matrix. T is for the total view of the life. And the total view of the life is T1 and the T2 and the T3. The T1 is the transactional approach. T2 is the transformational approach. A deep friendship between 2 friends. That is the T2. And T3 is the transcendental approach. What I call the higher order purpose of existence. So what is our higher order purpose of existence? Many of us reflect. And I think our age group reflects it more deeply rather than the younger age group, because they have yet to go through the life experiences. So you experience these 3, the T1 and the T2 and the T3. All the 3 are experienced. So the T is equal to T1 plus T2 plus T3. So that is the basic idea. That is the total view of human existence. Again, some thinkers emphasized too much T1. Some other thinkers emphasized T2. And a few thinkers emphasized the T3. Then the C principle. Just like Newton's 3 laws of motion, I've got these 3 laws of the society. The T law and the C law and the P law. The C is again C for completeness, a complete view of life, which again has 3 components. The C1 component, which is competition. The C2 component, which is cooperation. And the C3 component, which is connectivity. Today, IT industry talks about connectivity. Symbiosis, connectivity, these are the phrases which have become very popular today. So therefore, the view of life is C1 plus C2 plus C3. If you are a Darwinian thinker, then you will always think in terms of C1. You will never go beyond the C1. And if you are a what I call Maslowian thinker, then you will move from Darwinian curve to the next curve of life. And that is the curve which is the C2 kind of a curve. Along with Maslow, there are many other people who have emphasized the cooperation. Even in management field, now people have come out with the new idea, which they call co-optation. That means competition plus cooperation. 20 years back, nobody accepted that idea. Because when I did my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, the word cooperation was not acceptable. Everything was competition, competition, competition. You have to go and kill the other fellow. Darwinian approach to life was the primary fundamental force at that point in time. But now people have realized that we need to cooperate, collective action. In fact, this year's Nobel Prize is on that, collective action. Mancur Olson's wife, I forget her name. The idea of collective action. And then the connectivity, C3. You want to connect with each other. What we called at one point in time, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that C3 concept. So we have to look at the life in terms of the second principle, which is the C. And the third principle is the P principle, and that is the 3 levels of self. All of us have got 3 levels of self. The lower self of the personality, the middle self of the personality, and the higher self of the personality. Which self we are manifesting in our day-to-day behavior. whether we are manifesting the lower self or the middle self or the higher self. In the traditional literature, if you find, people will only talk about the two self, the lower and the higher, generally. And if you go and meet any Swamiji, or he will say, no, you have to overcome your lower self and then go to the higher self, and there is nothing in between, that kind of an object, the discourse will be there. But in my view, there is a moderating self, and that moderating self is the middle self. The lower, it moderates the lower and the higher, particularly for ordinary people like us. Okay. Now we put this into an kind of an analytical framework, which I call the TCP matrix, and that becomes our matrix, which is there in my book, New Mantras in Corporate Corridors. That is the second book, which was published in 2007, and this is the fundamental matrix of that particular book. And so you have the T1, T2, T3, and the C1, C2, C3, and P1, P2, P3. So you get a holistic perspective of life. Again, let us look at where is economics here. It is T1, C1, P1. The entire knowledge base of economics is coming from this line. Where is the politics, not in a negative sense, the transformative politics, a politics which will create a transformation, a political vision which will create a social transformation. That is the T2 and the C2 and the P2. And where is spirituality? It is T3, P3, C3. So in one matrix, we have integrated the three disciplines, the economics and the politics and the spirituality. Of course, if you talk to economics people, they will reject the higher level. They will say, no, only this is the reality of life. That is all bunkam. That is all superstition. It doesn't happen that way. But this matrix now clarifies our thinking. And if you see P1, P2, P3, that axis is the psychology. If you see C1, C2, C3, and observe the society in terms of C1, C2, C3, then that vertical side is the sociology. And when you are looking at T1, T2, T3, then it is the philosophy.
What does the diagonal mean, sir?
Very interesting. What is the diagonal means? It is diagonal means integration. So you need to integrate all these together. Today what happens is, if I go to Bengaluru University and study political science, I am only studying probably T2, C2, P2. Okay. If I go economics department, I am only studying T1, C1, P1, and then come out and say, look, I have found the solution for everything on earth. I am a great economist. Okay. But your perspective is narrow, because you are looking at the reality of not from the total matrix, but from one part of the matrix or one cell of the matrix. That is the thing. So we need to expand our mental horizons to include all the cells to get that holistic picture.
If P1 is masquerading into P3, what happens?
Which one?
P1 is masquerading into P3.
P1 is converted.
To P3. He pretends into P3.
So once you convert P1 into P3, then you are beyond your selfish interest. Then you start thinking of the others. It's like mother. Mother is always P3 oriented. Why? Look at the spelling of mother. In mother, other is there, M-O-T-H-A-R. Other is there. In father, there is no other. We are all fathers here. There are more fathers here. Okay. So that is what I call the P3 is a mother approach to life. That means you take a softer approach to life. What today people call soft power. That phrase has been coined by some Harvard professor. That soft power will come provided we operate from the P3 level. Very interesting. In case any question, any other, or addition, like he has done the addition, what is the meaning of the axis out there? So now we get this complete perspective of the three principles of the society. A very simple yet analytical perspective, like the three laws, easy to remember, the T law, T1, T2, T3, P1, P2, P3, and C1, C2, C3. and we see the behavior of the entire matrix in the society. So that is the basic concept which comes. Now let us see what are the implications of all this for the new political vision. Instead of using the phrase alternate political vision, I will like to use the phrase new political vision, because from the alternate, a new comes. The new political vision will integrate the entire matrix. Right now, the current political vision is not integrating the entire matrix. It is based on a segmented view of life. So that is the basic idea which comes. So let's move further. That's what I call it as a holistic diagram. And on the cover page later on, I will donate this copy of this book, Western Windows, Eastern Door, to your library. And feel free to come and have a look at this, give me the feedback, give me your interactions and reactions. I will be very happy. And this, the cover page has this diagram. On the right side is the demand and supply curve. All of us are familiar, representing the market. On the left side is a balance in the society, reflecting the society. And on the top is a chakra. Chakra is a symbol of spirituality, the self. The three forces. And then there is a circle. And the circle has got a Y. And Y, and many of you are, I'm sure, scientists and all that. That center point of the Y represents the balance between these three forces. So once the balance is there between these three forces, then you get a holistic society. If the balance is not there, then you may get like a Western society, which is out of balance, which is only in demand and supply driven, or to some extent they will take care of the other thing. Again, you relate it to my earlier discussion. Where is capitalism in this? The right side represents, if I have to use the old phrases, the so-called capitalism. The left side represents the so-called socialism. And the top represents the so-called spiritualism. So this diagram gives us a new vision of integrating all the three forces together. And since this is a Y diagram, and Y is for yoga, so this is the yoga of life. Yoga for the society. Not in terms of the yoga of Ramdev or yoga of somebody else, but a yoga of mind where you achieve a balance between the different forces. So that is the basic idea. The market and the society and the self get integrated. Next. Again, I have used different terminology because we are all familiar with that. When we talk of market, everything is demand and supply. Today, if you ask an ordinary person also, why prices have gone up? Oh, it is because of demand and supply. Even an ordinary laborer class person will also use these phrases. On the other side, it is the rights and duties. It is the rights and duties dimension which brings the balance in the society. We talk about human rights. Now some people have started talking about human duties. Our constitution provides for both rights and duties of the state and the individual. But it doesn't provide for the rights and duties of the corporation. I think that is an idea which we need to add probably. What are the rights and duties of the corporate world? Nobody talks about it. And then you have the third idea, which again common sense we use every time, the means and the ends. So what is the relationship between the means and the ends? Guru Charan Das, a very famous corporate person, he has come out with a book, Mahabharata and Management. And book title of the book is Difficulty of Being Good. Difficulty of Being Good. And he does a very good analysis of the relationship between the means and the ends. And there is a lot of gray area between the means and the ends. So in order to have that deeper understanding, we must understand the gray area. It is not a dichotomized 0-1 situation, the means and end situation, but how do we deal with the gray area? So these are the three fundamental ideas which are integrated through this kind of a holistic vision. And then to integrate this idea, with a new vision of development. We get a new vision of development here. And what is that new vision of development? The demand and supply curve represents the economic development. The balance represents what I call the hope, higher order purpose of existence in the society. What is that hope which we have for the people, for us? Is there any higher order purpose of existence? Or we are only Darwinian creatures with no higher order purpose of existence? And the third one is the wisdom, the spiritual wisdom, or whatever wisdom in general. How do we use our resources in an optimal manner? There is a wisdom involved. Otherwise, you end up wasting the resources. So therefore, the new vision of development is that development with hope and wisdom. That is the catchphrase which I have created so that we can easily remember that idea. That the idea of development should be not just the LPG of Dr. Manmohan Singh or little bit of Amartya Sen. We need to go beyond all those ideas and create this new kind of an approach that yes, there must be development, but that development must have hope. That development must be done with wisdom. Unfortunately, these two are missing. The hope is missing and the wisdom is missing. And that is why there are so many troubles in the society, whether it is terrorism or so many other kinds of things which are there, because there is no hope for many people. We have failed to create that hope. So you find Naxalism. Why? Because there is no grassroots economic activity, particularly in those areas. There is no Naxalism in Gujarat. Why? There is so much of grassroots economic activity. People are busy with their grassroots economic activity. You make this study and you will find that all the areas wherever Naxalism is dominant, you will find there is no grassroots economic activity in those areas. So what do? A set of non-violent people have been converted into violent people. India was known for non-violence, but the same fellows are taking up arms and fighting it out with this and that, and then we are trying to struggle with the solutions for that. So therefore, unless we articulate this new vision, which is a development with hope and wisdom, then only probably we will be able to energize the people around us. And this idea, I take it further and I combine it with another set of 3 principles. And that's where I connect it with what we call the Indian ethos. My work is known in that particular field. That's why I call my book as Western Windows, Eastern Doors. We need to open the Eastern doors. We need to create those new ideas. We can borrow from the best, but at the same time we have to understand the limitations of those ideas and go further. And here is that going further. Demand, supply and dharma, the principle number 1, will lead to a good economic development. Amartya Sen is also talking about something. He doesn't want to use the word dharma. He will use the word ethics. His book is there, Economics and Ethics. But I will like to use that word because that establishes my intellectual property right or India's intellectual property right on this idea. So we have extended Adam Smith, introduced the idea of dharma to the Adam Smith. Then rights, duties and sudharma. Very simple concept. If I do my duty as a teacher, if I perform my sudharma as a teacher, the students' rights will get automatically satisfied. There is no need for them to agitate and come against the teacher. Why they are coming and agitating for the rights? Because the teachers are not fulfilling their duties and the sudharma. And I am talking of this in the context of academic because I am from that field. But you can relate to many other fields. That's the problem in India today, that we have lost this connectivity and therefore we do not appreciate that by doing our duty we are fulfilling the rights of others. We only talk of human rights and we don't talk about the second dimension. And the third one is the top part, and there it is the means and ends and the wisdom. The wisdom comes the moment we look at means and ends in terms of the gray areas. And then this is the phrase which I call it as gray area management. That's the concept which particularly in India many good managers you will find They are not 0-1 managers. They are gray area managers because they look at, okay, the entire situation and then take the decisions. So that is the third concept. So we now see the connectivity of that particular diagram of holistic vision in terms of the Indian tradition, in terms of the Indian concepts. And then we have extended those ideas to a larger level. So therefore, finally, and I'm now on my final stages, and then we will have the question answers and comments and observations. And therefore, what we call, there is a need for an integrative view, and that is mentioned here. Again, that triangle is there, the market, here I put the word business, society, and the self, and the state is there in the center. Why did I put the state in the center and not at the top? Now, this is a new conceptualization of the role of the state. Of course, great political theorists have done a lot of work on the role of the state, but this is a new way of looking at the role of the state. The role of the state is to moderate these three forces and create an optimal combinations in the society. Then only the state will be a proper kind of a state. Today the problem, not only in India, with every nation probably, is the role of the state. China, the authoritarian state. India, fortunately, democratic state. But our democracy, we all know. Okay. So that is because that democratic state is not trying to achieve that balance. I do not know even in America to what extent Obama is trying to achieve that balance. Okay. So, but that is the model. That is the model for the future. In the future, this role of the state has to be articulated well. And therefore, this leads to a new political vision, which I call the prosperity, justice, and peace. Business, economic development will give us prosperity. Social balance means justice. And the spiritual dimension, the chakra, means peace. So that's the philosophy. I call it as PJP. I am communicating a new idea. Because right now we have the Congress and the BJP. So maybe we need another party which will be based on this new idea. Or maybe the Congress and the BJP has to transform their thinking towards this new vision, and they have to say that what India needs is all the three, the prosperity and the justice and the peace. And incidentally, that was this message from India's freedom struggle. All these great people here, they fought for what? They fought for the prosperity, they fought for the justice, and they fought for the peace. These three keywords are probably not there in the Constitution. Those who are experts on Constitution, in a holistic manner, they are not there. They may be probably segmented manner here and there. They may be out there somewhere in the Constitution. But what we need to do is that we need to integrate them and put them together so that that vision is very clear to us. So that is the basic idea of the message from India's freedom struggle. And this concept, I call it as a concept of the sacro-civic society. And now I will like to explain that idea, because that is the idea which creates the new political vision. We all know about the concept of civic society, but I am going to present to you this fundamentally new idea, which of course is there in my books. But for this audience, maybe you have not attended any of my earlier sessions, so probably you are not familiar with this idea. So what is that sacro-civic society? Before I come to that, here is a flag with three colors. A new flag. Green representing the prosperity, red representing the justice, and saffron representing the peace. So the entire vision is incorporated in these three colors. And again, if you permit me to use the word ism, then that is capitalism, communism, and spiritualism all get integrated in this. But more than that, this flag is a message for the corporate world of today. We have all experienced the recession and those kinds of things which have happened in America. Why? Because the American corporates are not using this flag. They are only using the green color, profit, profit, profit. And some of them may be doing what we call the CSR, the corporate social responsibility. responsibility towards the society. That idea is represented by the red color. And some of them may be following the third color also, what we call the good governance. So this flag is a flag for a new corporate model. And fortunately, India has probably a few examples of those new corporate models, maybe to some extent Infosys and a few others, maybe you are more familiar with that. But if you come to my institute, IBA, you will see this flag out there. Because this is how we, by showing the flag, we motivate our students that they are the future leaders. They have to create a future vision which will integrate these ideas, the holistic globalization. So that's the new political vision and a new social vision. Now, India's transformation towards the prosperity, justice and peace. For that, I will have to take a quick look in terms of the three phases. The socialistic vision, we are all product of that age. People of our age are quite familiar with that. We fought for it at one point in time. That was 1947. That was the crux of the Nehruvian vision. And of course, quite a number of good things happened, the infrastructure and this and that. Then came the LPG model of Dr. Manmohan Singh, the capitalistic vision. And now we have got the 20 years of experience of that. And then the recession came and we have been able to cope up with that. Why we were able to cope up with that? Because somewhere, though not at the policy framework, but at the operational level, we were following the third vision in a very informal manner. Not at the government level, but at the people level. And that is the future evolution of what I call the sacro-civic society. And that's the political space available to, maybe to political parties also, because no political party has articulated this kind of a thinking. So if they articulate, they can create that space for themselves. So that is the new political vision. And to appreciate this idea of the sacro-civic, and before I go to this view of history, look at the word sacro and the civic. To roughly remember it, sacro is Ram and civic is Rajya. So Ram Rajya concept, Gandhiji's Ram Rajya concept. But it is more than Ram Rajya concept. Because here the sacro means the sacred energies which are hidden in ourselves. We are not looking only for a leader who is Ram-like. What we are saying is that we are all Ram-like, or whatever phrase you want to use. We have that chakra inside us, the energy inside us. Whatever activity we do, let us manifest that energy into that action. So therefore this concept is slightly different. And then sacro also includes the environment dimension. So sacro-civic means you are taking now a spiritual dimension and the environment dimension and creating a new vision for the society. And today the people are able to appreciate this idea much better than 20 years back or 15 years back, because now we are seeing the climatic change and those kinds of issues which are there in the society. So this is, from the political science point of view, this is a simple but yet a kind of a breakthrough idea, because political scientists always talk about civic society. They don't want to incorporate the other dimension. So that's what I was saying, the TCP matrix. Now I have included the TCP matrix into this new vision and converted that analytical framework into something which is simple and, though not subjective, but it can draw emotional energies. And now when we look at this idea, we also need to look at what we call the historical view, which I call the 3G model of history. We are all familiar with Marxist models and other models of history. And here, if you look at it, the past, I have used the phrase seeding and fruit plucking societies, a phrase which is different from Marxist use of the hunting and gathering societies. Why I didn't use the word hunting and gathering societies? Because the very word hunting is indicative of the violence. Okay, that is because he was a Western thinker. Like Darwin also highlighted the violent dimension of nature. So similarly, Marx also highlighted the violent dimension of nature. Now we will get complete change in perspective the moment we call it seed and fruit plucking. That means you are one with the environment. So today, if you want to be one with the environment, we need to use this kind of a phrase. Then came the second phase, the kingdoms. There were good kings, and then there were bad kings. There were a lot of good kings in the past. We keep on hearing their stories. And then the entire Puranas and our literature, ancient literature, will talk about the good kings, but then we also find that there were also bad kings. So when in the society the good kings are more and the bad kings are less, then the society will prosper. You replace the word king by leader to make it more contemporary. If there are more number of good leaders vis-a-vis more number of bad leaders. What happened after the bad kingdoms? Then some revolutions took place, the Russian and this and that. Came the Industrial Revolution, the capitalism. But what were the consequences of that? So initially there was what I call the godness, because we are close to nature. Then there was goodness. There were quite a number of good people out there. The good leadership was there. And then came the greed. The kings started, they became greedy. Go and invade somebody else, acquire another empire, they became greedy. But that time there was no science and technology of the kind which we have today. There was no industrial revolution. There was no capitalism. So then came the industrial revolution and capitalism. What happened to the greed then? So greed became, instead of g raised to the power 5, it became g raised to the power 1000. Greed increased manifold, exponentially. Because now you have got the science and technology, you can go and exploit the resources everywhere on the earth. So the exploitation increased. The human exploitation increased. The colonialism came as a result of that. And then we had to liberate ourselves. So today we are in that state of affairs, where there is an increase in exploitation of the natural resources. So what we need today is a moderation of that greed. Narayan Murthy, of course, talks about compassionate capitalism. That is the phrase he uses in his book. If we can achieve that, very good. But I will like to go a little further and say that now the time has come to increase the goodness dimension in the society. And that's the reason for the sacro-civic society. And that is the ultimate idea here. People have been using the word sustainable development, but we need to add another word there, the compassionate and sustainable. The moment you include the word compassionate, you have brought in the dimension of the self into picture. And sustainable is dimension of the environment. So the entire circle is taken into consideration. And then of course, Nandan Nilekani has famous book, Imagining India. But I think I would like to go a step further, and probably in case I meet him next time, I would say, let's imagine world, not just imagine India. Imagine the world. Why? Because that is what India has done since ancient times. It never imagined only India. Though we may say, what is that, Bharatkhande, Jambudvipe, and so on and so forth. Okay. But at the same time, it was imagining the world. And how did we imagine? Now here I have another way of looking at India's history. I wish there are some JNU professors here. It will be good to have a debate with them, because they have got a strong views on Indian history. And here I have got an alternative perspective on Indian history. A history which created imaginations. A history which was not just hunting and gathering societies, or the history of bad kings dominating this region, but a history which gave imaginations. And what are those imaginations? The imagination number one. These are the three imaginations. The imagination number one, the spiritual enlightenment. I think the whole world recognizes that. That is an imagination which was given whatever number of years, 2500 or whatever number of years you want to put it. And of course before that the mythological period is also there. I am taking the history because some people may say, oh, that is all mythology. Ram never existed and this never had happened, that never happened. It's okay, fine, we are quite comfortable with that. But even though mythology can influence the future. I went to Bangkok and I found the Samudra Manthan statues there on the airport. Why a 21st century airport should have a Samudra Manthan statue? That means somewhere down the line, the mythology is influencing the thought process of people. Okay, so spiritual enlightenment, and I think two names come to my mind immediately, Mahavira, Buddha and others. And then there was for almost 1500 years or so, there was hibernation in creating imagination. But then we ended up creating another imagination, and that is imagination of liberation. So initially it was imagination of spiritual enlightenment, then came the imagination of liberation, which liberated half of the world, which influenced Martin Luther King and South Africa and all that all we know. And today is the time for the third imagination. And that is the third imagination, a new awakening. That if we have to deal with the issues of society, then you need a new vision, a socio-political vision for the society. And that is what I call the sacro-civic society. That is the 21st century. And with that, let me see, anybody who is interested in going into details of these ideas, what I have done is I have given you a lot of analytical frameworks because I wanted to look at the issues from an analytical perspective. From the micro to the macro, the relationships in between. Because most of the time we get a confusion because somebody is talking only from the macro level, somebody is talking only from the micro level, somebody is talking only from economics perspective, somebody talks only from political science perspective. So here we need to integrate them together and provide a new imagination, not only probably for India, but probably for the world. So with that I will like to conclude, and these are my books, Western Windows, Eastern Doors, New Mantras in Corporate Corridors, and Shunya poems. I have also written poems to explain these ideas, which I call the Shunya poems, because this is okay for intellectuals like you, but we have to communicate to the ordinary people. Then I find the medium of poetry is very simple idea, and through that my experiments with, I call it corporate rhymes. So there is a book on that which was recently released, and my website is also there, shunyacreations.com. With that, thank you very much, and once again thank you for giving me this opportunity. Yeah, please come, you can come here, and so that everybody can hear.
In the history of
So that
human civilization, has ever one society achieved PJP, prosperity, justice, and peace?
Very good. I think this is a very interesting question which we need to explore. If no society has achieved it, then we need to go in that direction. That is the more reason that we need to go in that direction. Not only India, but even America. So there will be a party PJP in America also, in a lighter vein. Okay.
Now, how do you plan to achieve it?
Absolutely, very good point. Now, how do we operationalize this? That means we have to create institutional structures which will incorporate these ideas. We have to create not one JNU. JNU created a complete Marxist thinking. So we need to create a university around this idea, to spread this idea to the rest of the world. Create institutional structures. Create our governance structures which will change this. And this is what I call we need to rotate the pyramids. Because right now we have the pyramids. Government is a pyramid. And there is always a lot of gap between the top of the pyramid and the bottom of the pyramid. Of course, Professor C.K. Prahlad has made that pyramid very popular, but I have a critique of that. He says bottom of the pyramid, how to include that. That is inclusive globalization. But the problem is, there is a gap. So much of gap. So what do? You try to rotate the pyramid.
But according to Sigmund Freud, these three values are beyond human conception or imagination.
Which three values?
Prosperity, peace and
See, that's, we can differ with Freud. Freud is not the ultimate authority. No, why should we take Freud as ultimate authority? He was only talking from a psychological perspective. He never took economic perspective. He never took other perspective. He never took socio-political perspective. He never took spiritual perspective. His was the lower self. Freud gave too much emphasis to lower self. That's what I call a need for a paradigm shift from Freudian id to spiritual id. Spiritual id is inner divinity, ID. Inner divinity. So I've created a counter idea to Freud, because that was the problem with Freud. He emphasized too much on the lower self. All Western thinkers, Darwin emphasized violence, Freud emphasized the lower self, and then, what is his name? Darwin, Freud, and who else is there? Yeah, these are the two important ones. Even Marx emphasized the lower self.
Something nearer to this, what I can imagine is, I got one is, sorry, only one question not completed.
Yeah, I think, can we allow him to complete? And then, yeah.
Something which is nearer to whatever this modeling, whatever you have done. Very, very nice, it is a very good system. But the one thing is, Ramraj or Swaraj of Gandhiji is something nearer to this model.
Yeah, that's what I said, no? Sacro civic. So Ram is sacro and civic is the civic. But I have extended that idea, because in Gandhi's Ram Raj, the responsibility is on the leader. The leader is Ram. What here I am saying is, people, everybody is creating that energy within them. Whether we call it Ram or Krishna or XYZ, okay, depending upon your religion or whatever it is. What I am trying to say is that if everybody is creating that energy within yourself and radiating that energy in whatever task you are doing, then you achieve the sacro-civic society. But many of the Western models, they deny that. Freud will deny that kind of energy to people. Marx will allow the revolutionary energy. Okay, workers of the world unite, so revolution. But he will deny the spiritual energy. Okay. Only in India's freedom struggle we saw the manifestation of that, and maybe we have exhausted that energy, and now there is nobody to re-energize it. Okay.
human basic biological system is not made for all these things to achieve. What do you say?
Then again you are taking a viewpoint of the Western thinkers. You are taking the viewpoint of the Western thinkers. That's what the Western, and unfortunately because of our mind is so colonized in India, every thinker thinks the way you are thinking. Because those are the books which we read. Those are the ideas which we read. Those are the ideas which are taught to our students. So all intellectuals will think only in that way. And they think that it is not achievable. Nobody believes that non-violence can be used to achieve the liberation of a nation. But we have the evidence from history, which is to counter your argument.
So when I'm thinking of the mathematical model you have given, sir, I see that two dimensions are missing there. One is time dimension, that is past, present, and future, which is partially told.
Okay.
I am talking about the other aspect. And another aspect is classes of people, that is upper class, middle class, and lower class. But what we are finding is generally, in the upper class, there may be few Gandhis even now. But in the middle class, there may be hundreds of Gandhis.
Quite right.
But in lower class, there can be millions of Gandhis. Even though this model is there, how these Gandhis in the lower class can get some inputs from the upper class where they want to sustain their...
No, I am rotating the pyramid. I am rotating the pyramid. I am saying this bottom of the pyramid is now on the top.
No, but it,
If you rotate the pyramid, the so-called bottom goes to the top.
but the way
And the person who is the bureaucrat sitting there is not on the top of the pyramid, but everybody has got equal access. Right now you don't have the access. No, this issue I have answered in my another framework, which I call India as a matrix society. That is another framework. There was no time to explain that, where I have addressed this issue of the class and the caste and the community and categories. So class, let's start with caste, that is Manu. Then come to class, that is Marx. Come to community, that is Mahatma. And come to categories, today's categories, that is market. So you get the entire flow of history right from the Manu to the markets. So today you are creating new categories. The categories of engineers, the knowledge workers, and this and that. And there I have presented another framework, which you can, other time we can talk in greater detail. Can we take one by one?
Buddha says, Ati Aseye Dukkakke Mula. Our Abdul Kalam says, high ambition is important for the prosperity. There is a clash between Buddha and the our. If you come to the middle point, there is no thrill in that. Whether you have to follow Buddha or you have to follow Abdul Kalam.
No, again, that is a dichotomized approach to life. It's an either or. Between 0 and 1, if you have studied mathematics, there are many solutions. There are many numbers. Now, either we move in the direction of, I will not use the word Abdul Kalam, I will use the Adam Smith. That means you keep, or Pepsi, ye dil mange more. So you keep on increasing the demands and keep on increasing your, needs, and ultimately do what? Ultimately spoil the environment, spoil the water resources. Wherever Pepsi, these things are there, the people of villagers of that place are struggling for water. So either you follow that approach, you go to that extreme, or you follow the Buddha, the need minimization, complete minimization. But see, all of us cannot be Buddhas in that sense. We cannot be Mahaviras. We cannot be Jain monks. How many of us are willing to go to the Himalayas and say, no, we don't want anything. Even today, all our gurus are spending more money in order to survive and live a luxurious life, rather than giving that framework of the Buddha. So we need in between, somewhere. And all societies will have to experiment with that. What I'm saying is, India has got a chance in history to lead the world and demonstrate that it is possible. Okay. One is at imagination level. I have created an imagination by giving some catchphrases which may appeal to many people. They get excited about it. It goes into your consciousness. I have told you, PJP, you will never forget the prosperity, justice and peace. Those ideas you will never forget. So that's the imagination. See, language is very important. You create an imagination through the language. That's what Gandhiji did. He used 2 phrases, quit India, and the whole nation was on march. So we need to create new kind of perspectives on the basis of our experience. Well, why Gandhiji did not say PJP? Because that time, though indirectly, this was needed, but in terms of articulation, he used the phrase Ramraj. Because he could motivate the entire nation using the word Ramraj. Today I go to US and tell Ramraj, people will say, what is this Ramraj? You don't understand. But if I say sacro-civic society, there is a resonance. Everybody can relate to it. And then of course I explain a little more. So that is whatever said and done, we will have to use contemporary language at this point in time. So create what I call the new mantras. In fact, my entire book is titled as New Mantras in Corporate Corridors. So these are the new mantras, because mantras create vibration. The words create vibrations. And they give the new perspective, new ways of looking at things. You may disagree with whatever I have said. But at the same time, I am sure if you meet me after a week or 10 days or even after a month or 6 months, you will definitely remember at least 1 or 2 ideas. But in order to ensure that you remember more ideas, I will present this book to the Gokhale Institute of public administration, and I think it has been wonderful, unless there is some quick one or two. Yeah. Let's give a big hand.
Last question for you. After hearing your this managerial presentation, I'm just recollecting about a week before a program was here, by name Dharma and Samarasya. What that was presented was, we come under these Purusharthas, everybody needs in Artha and Kama to achieve moksha, what you call it as peace, a peaceful living and enjoyment.
Very good. I think that's a good connectivity.
And if you can only link Artha and Kama through moksha, the Dharma's link, which preaches, do's and don'ts, rights and duties and all these things, probably the whole summary of this probably comes under our Purusharthas.
Absolutely, very good observation. That's what I was saying, that I have drawn from the Indian ethos. That is the Trivarga theory of Kautilya. But if I go and tell that half of our own generation, your own children will not know what is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. I can bet it. I can bet it, you can take a test. Nobody knows. Our generation may know. But today, unless you put these ideas in analytical framework, when I give this kind of analysis, I give a matrix, I give a basket, that is basket is full. Okay, I give a flag, I give the symbolism of our lions. That is a contemporary way, analytical way. And I find that the younger generation gets totally energized with some of this. One or two of my students are here, the PhD students are here, and they are working on for their PhD thesis on the idea of the basket of needs and how the corporates are able to fulfill those basket of needs. What are the different ways in which they can fulfill? Guru Tej, can you just stand? So Guru Tej is teaching in Hassan, and he has come all the way, and his thesis is going to be that. So what I have done is, that's what I was saying. So far, there was no Indian model of development. The phrase Indian model of development was never properly articulated. A model of development which is linked with the ancient, that's why the subtitle of this book I don't have a copy, later on I will give a copy to that. The subtitle is Ancient Roots, ROOTS, to Global Roots, ROUTES, or as Americans will say, routes. Okay, so from the roots to the routes. Okay, so that is the basic idea. And you can see the three lines here. The green line, the red line, and the saffron line. And somebody said, sir, you have put those three, are you a Shiva Bhakta? Okay, so you find these three lines here, which represent that particular idea. So that gives us a holistic vision. And then there is a triangle there, which has three dimensions. The left side of the dimension is science, the right side of the dimension is art, the objective and the subjective. But the two are connected with the central line here, if you see, go by the brain sciences. And then you get here, that is the seat of spirituality, the seat of wisdom. Maybe Kautilya used to keep that, ancient times. Now we have given up, so we have lost our wisdom, because symbolically. So that is what the knowledge system of the science, knowledge system of the art, knowledge system of the spirituality. Once all the three are integrated, we can achieve this balance, which you are mentioning. Thank you very much. It has been just wonderful interacting with such an enlightened audience, and maybe I will look forward for another opportunity, even to meet you in a person-to-person basis. Thank you so much.
Friends, before vote of thanks, I would like to share next program, that is tomorrow. We have one more interesting talk by Dr. B.V. Acharya, former Advocate General of Karnataka, on judicial activism and public interest litigation. Honorable Justice Bhakta Vatsala will be presiding over the function. I request all of you to attend in large numbers and benefit from that talk also. Friends, till now we have heard a very interesting and enlightening talk. some of us have asked, where are such institutions? The founder of this institution, Dr. D.V. Gundappa, founded this institution for enlightened citizenship. From people, we have to become citizens, from then to enlightened citizens. Then only the ideal of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam can be realized. To put it in other words, in our ancient times, the Avibhakta Kutumba was a foundation to realize Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Friends, we are very happy that Dr. Subhash Sharma has given us so many thoughts to prevail upon and to enrich our own lives and the lives of people around us. Thank you, sir.
I am happy to donate the proceedings of this session back to the Gokhale Institute. This is the receipt.
Please, receipt.
Okay.